Yes, this is a Kirblog. It's another Kirblog. It's about X-Men, specifically the films. Best I could do on short notice. I didn't write that one. Welcome. I am recording this while I am away at Fanime in beautiful San Jose, California. And this is the weekend of X-Men Week, which is also like the Spider-Man Week being extended in celebration of X-Men Apocalypse coming out the weekend that I'm away. I think the day that this is going up, actually. But I digress. I am surprisingly joined by two excellent folks who have never been on the show before. I was going to do this one solo, and then I realized, oh my fucking god, I'm an idiot. I was going to have these guys on with me during Marvel Month. That's even part of the reason why I was going to do it in the first place. So without further ado, would you guys like to introduce yourselves in whatever order you deem necessary?
Yeah, I'm Matt Gardner from, if you know me from anything, it's probably Floating Hand Studios.
I'm Peter Gresser. I am the voice of your doubts. I'm from Floating Hands Studios.
And if you guys don't know Floating Hand Studios, you very well might know them by their work because they did the wonderful X-Men Floating Hands cartoons. Would you say the most popular of which was the Death Becomes Them one?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that or Dark Phoenix Rising.
Okay.
Those two both hit a million.
So if you know us by our voices, Matt is
Cyclops and Jean.
That's right.
And
I am
Magneto.
Oh, yes, I am Magneto.
That's right.
And you were everybody else, basically.
I am pretty much everybody else. I'm Wolverine, and I'm also Emma.
And yeah, I was a big fan of these guys back in like my early Newgrounds days. And then did we meet through Mac? I think when he was visiting one time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was the Thanksgiving.
No, it wasn't the things.
Was it?
Or was it the Dust Party? It might have been.
No, it wasn't the Dust Party. We didn't go to that.
No, but it was the week that Edwin was in town.
Oh yes, Edwin. It was the second time we were.
It was Anime Expo.
That's
a couple
right.
years ago,
That's right.
But we didn't go to Anime Expo because we were looking for apartments for being here, and we didn't know that Anime Expo existed.
That's okay. You weren't missing much. That's not true. No, I love Anime Expo. Yeah, so known each other through mutual actor friends. Devin Mack, who's Raccoon on Tome, obviously, and Edwin Tiong, who's in everything I've ever made, and who we love dearly.
If I'm the voice of your doubts, Edwin is the voice of your hope.
No, he'd probably say, no, I'm the voice of your sadness. Oh, haha. I love you, Edwin. He's probably not listening to this anyway. So I wanted to bring Matt and Peter with me on this one to talk about the X-Men movies. Again, obviously, the weekend this is coming out, Apocalypse, I think will just be in theaters. So I'll be away, hopefully, seeing that. But I just recently rewatched Days of Future Past a couple days before this is going up. And before Days of Future Past came out, now, what was it, 2 years ago, I think, by this point?
Yep.
Oh, my God. That was quick. I had a little movie marathon of all the X-Men movies, including Wolverine Origins, which we'll get to that.
Wolverine.
Please, pardon me. Sorry.
I think there's 2 colons in there.
Is there?
Well, I mean, it's 3
Well,
if you're
no,
including...
it's X-Men Origins : Wolverine. :
The Second Coming :
No.
Electric Boogaloo.
There's at least 2 colons because there's the movie and then there's the script.
Good night, everybody. But yeah, so I've watched all of them relatively recently. I saw the Wolverine in theater. I've seen all of them in theaters except for X-Men Origins Wolverine, which we'll get to. But I guess before we go into that, since you guys are first timers on the Kirblog, do you want to talk briefly about your history with X-Men as a franchise or anything in particular like that?
Well, I was a very early teenager in the 90s, so like everyone else in my age group, I watched the hell out of the X-Men cartoon on Fox. Mm-hmm. And no better than to go back and watch it again, because
it does not
hold up very well.
That's why, sadly, on the previous Kirblog I did with Mike and Steve about the cartoons, we didn't have much to say about it because we didn't really watch it. But at least you've actually seen it, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Even then, this is looking back. One of those, like, I'm kind of destined to be a bit of an animator because even as a kid, it drove me crazy that every character had the exact same body. that drove me nuts.
Superhero characters had a lot of the same bodies. I think at that time too.
The Senator has the same body.
Was also He-Man, and you're He-Man.
There's the episode where this political guy, and he infects himself with the mutant disease, and he says, "Let the world know that mutants carry the plague," and he rips his shirt open, and he has the superhero
bulging
six-pack,
biceps,
and it's just like it was just, it was freaking weird.
Hey, you know what? Working with
Being a bigot involves a big gym
membership.
routine.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, you have to carry around the weight of the cross of your secret desires and all of the things that you and like it's I'm carrying an albatross over one shoulder and a cross on the other.
Did you also grow up with the cartoon?
Oh, I did. Well, okay, so I grew up with the cartoon, but also kind of got into the comics through, and this is going to be, I don't know, Chris, if you saw this one, Book It. Do you remember the Book It program?
No,
You
I don't
didn't
think
have
so.
that. Okay. So the Book It program was this program that was put on by, I believe, Scholastic, and the idea was to get kids to read.
Okay.
And if you read, like me, like a normal child, if you read a book, I'm going to say like an Encyclopedia Brown, you would get a star or two.
Okay.
If you're a weirdo like Matt, and you read A Brief History of Time, as I recall.
I got 2 stickers for that.
Well,
And I was so pissed off because there was this other kid in my class who, for every ending in a Choose Your Own Adventure, he got a star.
What?
So he got like 7 stars for reading, like, I was attacked by a slime.
Cheap piece of shit.
And then I got two stars for reading freaking Stephen Hawking in 3rd grade.
I'm so sorry.
I was a weird kid.
Oh, you still are. So one of the things that you got for Book It, you would take the points that you would earn with these stars, and you would get like a button, and then you would get like pizza from Pizza Hut, so that you could taste disappointment, and then you would get.
It tastes like grease.
It does. Grease and disappointment like lubricate everything. So you got a X-Men comic.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
the Pizza Hut one. That has one of my favorite, because it's specifically it's very much the cartoon version of the characters.
Oh, okay.
And that is the most fuddy-duddy version of Cyclops that ever exists.
Absolutely.
And so, no, I'm not kidding. There is one of the Pizza Hut ones opens up with they need to fix some problem with the danger room, and because it's the 90s, they have to go into virtual reality to get into the computer.
Yeah.
And Jubilee says something about how, wow, this is awesome, and Cyclops is like, no, computers are not fun. I can't remember the line, but it is nearly that.
So
And that
it was
such
it was a comic specifically based on the show, based on the comic.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
And,
meta
well,
as fuck.
Except it had the lineup from the cartoon,
But it was
the
its own
characterizations
continuity.
from the cartoon, but it had a bunch of villains that weren't from the cartoon. It had Amelia Voigt, who shows up in the cartoon eventually, and yeah, I'm getting blank stares because she's kind of obscure.
That's why I brought them. Because
Yeah.
they actually know what the shit. They told me who Zorn was today. I'm just like, who the fuck has he been in one of the movies yet? I don't know.
Oh, he will be eventually. They're going to keep cranking these things
Okay,
out.
give it time.
I can't
yeah.
wait till the 3-part Zorn saga.
Oh, Jesus.
That'll be next because they're finishing a trilogy of the Fassbender.
If they don't do Mr. Sinister next, I will be really surprised.
Yeah,
He's like the big
I am
one they
expecting
haven't
that
done
for
yet.
sure.
I don't know,
yeah.
Matt. I'm looking for Zorn 2, the Rezorning. Electric Zorn glue.
I hope more than 3 of you know anything that is happening right now.
Literally, it's just us in this room, and I promise only Matt and I know what's going on. Poor Chris. I'm so sorry.
Again, that's why, because you guys speak a different language of this that I don't know. But so the 90s cartoon, and did you guys also both read the comics as well?
So I took that Pizza Hut comic, and I took it to the comic book store, which was totally not a front for a drug ring, and to absolutely legitimate business.
Yuma, Arizona.
Yeah, absolutely, in Yuma, Arizona. And I said, I really, really like this, and would you mind introducing me to more stuff? And the man behind the counter, who is a big comic book geek, sighed the heavy sigh that only a true comic book geek being presented
had
with
a
a
feeling.
10-year-old
Yeah.
with this,
the
crap
Pizza Hut comic.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we got more X-Men. Yeah, I'm sure we could find some in the store. So around that time,
what a dick.
well, around the time, it's okay. He was, peddling coke out back. So So what's that smell? Don't inhale it. So you are 10 years old. That was around the time that they did the no adjective, just X-Men #1 reboot, which basically was the idea is bring it in line with the cartoon. They were launched pretty much simultaneously with one another. They weren't the same continuity, which was just terribly confusing to me as a child.
So the same characters, the same designs, which were launched only a year prior. Like they had to have had these in advance for the cartoon.
It's funny because, like, on a little side note, like I've always been a big Mega Man, guy, and when Mega Man Battle Network was, like, of the 7 different sub franchises they had of Mega Man out. Excuse me. Mega Man Battle Network had the video games as the source material, the manga that was its own interpretation of the events and characters and power-ups of whatever the newest game was, and then the anime, which was spun off of the manga, and it had its own interpretation of it. So I'm like, okay, Mega Man Battle Network 3 just came out, so I'm seeing 3 different versions of the same characters and the same, and in this one, this character's a villain. In this one, this character dies. In this one, this character is a good guy. Or this one, this character doesn't exist at all. Like, so by that point, somehow I think I was used to enough by that with like cross-media
if you follow
shit.
Battle Network, we might have to make just an episode that is you just trying to explain Base as he exists in Battle.
I'll have them back for that someday because I'll gladly do that shit for you.
I could not figure that one out.
I'm sure. Who's the X-Men character equivalent of Battle Network Base that's like so
Zorn.
fucking Zorn? Okay, that's about right.
So I had my guy at the comic book store, and he said, "Yeah, we'll get you some X-Men." And poor guy. I mean, he's giving me all of these really central to the canon books. X-Men in Australia in the 80s, and Storm has a mohawk. Wolverine solo series, some X-Force #1. All this stuff, and I was just so completely confused by it. So I just stuck with just regular X-Men, and if I had to buy another book to continue the story, which they did a lot in the 90s, this story has continued. It started in X-Men, and now it's in
Uncanny X-Men. There was a period where it was basically a bi-monthly title with 2 different numbers.
Did they also ever have, like, I mean, this is much more common now, but did they have like compilations of like multiple issues together, or was that not even a thing at the time?
Not really at the time.
Oh
No.
god, it must
You
have
pretty
been
much had to
murder.
buy the singles.
Yeah. And of course, they were all done with the pricing from Wizard magazine.
Yeah.
So,
the 90s.
Yeah, one comic would
If
be.
it had Sabretooth on the cover, it's worth at least $12 just for that.
Yep. Lucky us. Sabretooth. Best character ever.
Comic collectors, I swear to God, must be like rich or insane or
No,
or thieves.
they-
No,
Actually-
the bottom fell out in the 90s.
Yeah, now everything's digital, so the paper.
That's true, yeah.
Anything mid-80s or later is generally considered to be worthless.
Okay.
So I.
Just because they started printing for the
Okay.
collectors,
Yeah.
and there's just too much of it out there.
That makes sense.
So I read X-Men pretty religiously up through the Phalanx Covenant, which just stopped making a lick of sense to me.
Well, the crossovers, like even looking back at them, they were held together with spit and bailing wire. It's amazing they got as cohesive a narrative as they did.
Absolutely, and then I stopped reading comic books in general for better part of a decade at that point, and then Matt moved in with me, and he drove in. At this point, I'd known Matt for 3 years,
Something like that.
We had met because we were both doing web comics at the time, and he drives up. He's going to move in with me. He drove cross country. And he pulls up in this half-wrecked Ford with
Super hot.
with the to wit, yes, in fact, it was super hot. He was wearing a full fleece sweatshirt, and it was June in Phoenix.
I'm sorry.
He didn't know what he had in store, and the back of the car is really heavily weighed down, and he pops the trunk, and it's all of these long boxes or Tupperware bins, the
This big
plastic.
Tupperware bin full of comics.
And I said, "What is this?" And he said, "It's my comic book collection." And he said,
You're a keeper.
I said, "Well, no." I said, "You collect comic books?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You read comic books?" And he said, "Yeah." I was like, "I haven't done that for like 10 years." He's like, "Well, I still do." I said, "Oh, I had no idea." And he said, "We met through a comic chat." how did you not know that I was into comics? And I said, I'm not known to be particularly observant or, caring. So, Matt got me back into comics about a decade after the fact. And the Bendis run, the Morrison run.
It was the Morrison run of X-Men, which, at least for everybody our age that's still reading X-Men, they generally picked it up with X-Men #1, fell off somewhere in one of the crossovers, which crossover varies depending on the person.
Yeah.
And then picked it back up in either the Morrison run or the immediately following Buffy, Joss Whedon.
Run.
Okay.
Yeah. The Whedon run was good.
Yeah.
So you had been following X-Men comics for like a while.
I had kind of fallen out during the late 90s.
Okay.
I'd still kind of paid attention to them, but I really started picking them up again with the start of the Morrison.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think that's kind of like with a lot of people with certain Shonen Jump series now where like they keep an eye on like what's going on with Naruto or Bleach right now or whatever, but like they're not actually following them anymore.
Anytime I try to get into really any anime, Sailor Moon or manga, Sailor Moon, Ranma,
At least those
Dragon
have
Ball.
beginning, middle, and ends to them.
But everybody always tells me, okay, read these chapters, skip these, and then pick it up back.
Oh well, then
later.
they're stupid for telling you that.
But that's always what I hear.
Oh well, then we have to have a conversation after this.
I'm
apparently.
sure we will.
Well, okay, so obviously, I mean, a point of kinship, which is awesome. I mean, X-Men certainly does bring a lot of people together in a lot of different ways.
And we agree on nothing in it.
Well, enough to
But
where...
we agree on one thing. Nothing good can ever happen to the X-Men.
Oh, God, never. I'm surprised that they just haven't had, like, a tax audit at this point. I'm sure they probably have.
I've started the process of rereading the entire run.
Wow.
Don't know why. I actually got through the whole Claremont run, which was the goal. But then I went past it, and that's getting much more difficult.
Okay.
But I was amazed when there's the wedding issue where Cyclops and Jean get married, and nothing bad happens.
Right.
It's
Well, no, hold
That's
on.
weird.
Or it's uncanny.
yes.
Hold on. Warren can't tie his bow tie. And you'd think that somebody like Warren Worthington III would be able to tie a bow tie reflexively at this point.
It's the little things
It is
in our,
the
in
little
our
things,
lives.
yeah.
Well, but he is.
He's overcome with emotion.
He's also been brainwashed into a death machine and still dealing with that. So he's trying not to kill the bow tie.
He'll just cry a lot, and somehow he'll like finagle the shape together, and it works.
That's the life
Warren's
of a
great.
wasp, honestly. Just crying your way through tying a bow tie.
So obviously your guys' cartoons didn't come until by the time the movies had been coming out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
correct.
the second movie had at least been out.
Okay, so it was as far back as X2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, because X3 came out after we did a couple of them.
Right, and then you
we
did the
one
Dark
that
Phoenix
is
Rising.
X3.
Right.
The first X-Men came out before Matt moved down.
Okay, gotcha. Well so then going back to that time, then we're skipping around the timeline a little bit in history. Little
How like X-Men?
right, yeah. Well, fucking good God, we're not up to that part yet. First class is like 30 more minutes into this conversation, probably. Now someone's gonna skip ahead, like, oh no, you're still talking about Origin. Sorry. Fuck's sake. That's why I'm not good at predicting the future like other X-Men characters are. Ha. So X-Men 1. By that point, I had seen a little bit of the 90s cartoon. I had watched Evolution. I knew who enough of the characters were. So I was not like a hardcore X-Men fan, but I was definitely like, okay, I'm very intrigued about this universe because like there's something about this I think, you know what? It was probably off the heels of like Power Rangers and stuff like that where like teams of superpowered heroes and also Justice League I think had been airing by that point, I'm pretty sure, and stuff like that.
I think so.
I'm pretty sure. it
Yeah,
had
Justice
been.
League. I think the cartoon had come out.
It was like
at that point.
mid to late 90s or so. Yeah, that sounds about right. So I was into superheroes and teams and things like that. So X-Men was like up my alley. And X-Men 1 comes out. So, I think, I guess to start off with, finally now, almost 20 minutes into this, we're talking about the actual movies. And that's fine. I think the general consensus a lot of people have about the first X-Men movie, including Bryan Singer, I apologize, what's his full name?
Matt's permanent celebrity crush, Mr. Bryan Singer.
Is this true, Matt?
It used to be.
Used to be. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, he's
No,
kind of
that-
aged like milk.
But back in
poor
2000, I had
Brian.
a huge crush.
Of all people, and not like Hugh Jackman or Jason Marsden or...
Matt isn't going to kick any of them out of bed, but Bryan Singer was Yeah, he was the one.
I like nerds.
Oh, fair
Yeah,
enough.
he really does.
Well, he is still a nerd, if that means anything.
Yeah.
I still think he's handsome.
But he was talking about in one of his interviews in the DVDs where he was being very handsome about because I used to watch a lot of the behind the scenes shit on the X-Men DVDs, and he mentioned in the one for X2 actually how when I was making X-Men 1, I felt like a part of me felt like I was making just a giant trailer for a bigger movie. And I think a lot of people can kind of agree on that with the first X-Men movie.
So the first X-Men movie, I have such a mixed opinion on it. I want to be kind to it because it is really worth remembering that we wouldn't have things like an Iron Man, an Avengers, a Captain America, or for that matter, a X-Men First Class or Deadpool, if we hadn't had that built upon the backs of X-Men and Spider-Man.
Those are what really launched the
modern
superhero thing.
Yeah. Basically, the point on this is if you want these to stop, the scourge of superhero movies to stop, just stop watching them and know who to blame.
Yeah.
So, but that having been said, the first X-Men movie is, I just do not super care for it. Like it was good, but I am impressed that they were able to do a full movie with like 15, maybe 17 lines of dialogue in the entire freaking...
It's pretty quiet, yeah.
There's not a lot of talking.
They're pretty terse.
They really... And, you do have the moments where you have the little bits of, Whedon's original pass at the script.
Did he do the first draft of it?
He did a draft of it.
Okay.
The thing is, that thing had been in production for so long.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And
when did it come out? Was it like 2002 or 3 or
2000.
something? Okay. Oh, wow. Was it just before Spider-Man then?
I think they were within a couple of months.
Okay, yeah.
It might have been 2001, but they
probably
were
Sony. It was probably Sony and Fox competing with each other on who would get out first.
It was a real 1-2 punch. Like they were contemporary.
I'm sure that anybody who's listening to this can just pop on IMDb and But
leave a comment berating us about it. Carry on.
Well, what's new? Berate me away, Dad. So
he's listening to this.
So one of the weird things about the first movie is, for a summer spectacle movie, it's relatively low budget,
and also weirdly, there are a lot of parts of it that are sort of low key. Like it is a summer spectacle movie, but like a substantial portion of it is, I'm on a road trip in the north.
Yeah, it's rather restrained.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that worked for its best because a lot of the previous superhero movies that you
We'll meet again, Spider-Man! I mean, that was probably after anyway, but the fact that was like, this is a comic book movie where everybody has to No, what was... One of your guys did an impression... One of you guys did an impression of the 90s X-Men cartoon where everybody's just like stating aloud everything that they're doing at all moments. Yeah, like
I'm going to this room and I'm using the key to open the door, and this entire time I'm smelling the scent of lilacs and it's reminding me of my mother who left me years ago. This is on and on.
And Cyclops Captain explained the obvious.
Oh, Christ.
Gene, there's a button. It's a thing you can depress into the console.
oh, please, Scott, I have to do it so that we can have our child in the future that will become a plot point in 20 episodes. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Well, if it's the cartoon...
Don't touch the fire, that's hot.
If it's the cartoon, Gene's only line is, Scott! Faint.
And then, of course, don't forget, Professor Xavier's only line is, yeah! So...
I must use my mind. Yeah!
Meanwhile, in fucking contrast, you have like in the movie, just like Logan and Rogue in the fucking car, silence for like 5 minutes. Like, so what's your name? I don't know. Okay, and then Sabretooth comes in, and there's a fight scene for like 5 seconds, and then more silence as they transition to the next area. There's nothing else quite like it.
It's sort of like it's the Ingmar Bergman film of superhero films, like long stretches of darkness and silence.
But
it's contemplative.
The one thing it really did right that superhero movies had not done before is they didn't kill off the main villain. That was a really big deal.
Well, and the MCU movies do that shit all the time now. They don't bring a lot of them back anymore.
Yeah, but the ones that will, like, they leave key ones alive.
Yeah.
But the end of the first movie, the most striking thing about it was Magneto isn't killed; he's arrested, And so you've got that fantastic scene at the end with him and Xavier in the plastic prison.
Mm-hmm.
And then Xavier leaves and the theme music starts playing and everybody's like, oh my God, I can't wait till the next movie. and that is the only thought you have leaving this movie is like, you're not even thinking about X-Men. You're thinking about, holy crap, X-Men 2 is going to be awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think to give credit where credit is due there, it's a hell of a canon to work with. I mean, X-Men is about as old as the original Star Trek, or for other perspective, about as old as the original Doctor Who.
Wow.
So if you consider, you're going back decades upon decades at this point.
Yeah.
Both Who and Star Trek are a little bit older, but only by a matter of a couple of years. So consider what you're working with. I mean, these characters have been around forever, and they've got truly dedicated fandom. So when you are doing this movie with this new interpretation, you know, Rogue is back to being a child.
Yeah.
I think the original introduction of Rogue in the comics, she was
At first, she comes across as being like 30, but as soon as they make her good, she's a teenager. It's totally what they do in comics all the time. You've got a villain who's introduced. They realize they're going to make them good. They start de-aging them. And then, because when she shows up, she is like super, super queer-coded. She looks like lesbian B. Arthur in her first appearance.
Oh, Rogue?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
She looks elder, like she looks middle-aged.
Right.
And then very quickly she starts getting younger and much more sympathetic.
Sure, and to be fair, I mean, because even I mentioned this, I think we joked about this on the cartoon one I did with Mike and Steve, but we watched the Pride of the X-Men pilot, and in that, I mean, like that's just very much the style where like Kitty's like, I am an adult, I'm 14. I'm like, you look like you're like 30, and that's just that pilot. But like, yeah, and in the 90s cartoon too, like just everybody was just because wasn't also Jubilee was a teenager. She was like supposed to be like 15, 16,
Yeah. She was supposed to
and
be
she looks
16
like she was in her 20s.
Hey,
That's just how it was.
She, to be fair, Jubilee, first, she is supposed to be a teenager who lives in the San Fernando Valley, and as residents of the San Fernando Valley, we can all attest to the fact that teenagers here look to be about 42 years old. It's because of the smog and the stress of living in Los Angeles. I totally can appreciate that. I could never be 4. I gotta tell you, anywhere else in the country, teenagers look like teenagers. But here, you've got like this 13-year-old with a 5 o'clock shadow.
It's mildly terrifying.
And like, a checkbook and a briefcase. And like, it's really worrying here. So, don't send your kids here is my point. But
X-Men movie.
Yes. What we're here to talk about.
Teenage Rogue was, and actually I like Kid Rogue. I feel like for me works better. As a
Rogue,
character.
especially because of her power set, is inherently really sympathetic.
Yeah.
Like you can get a lot of pathos out of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, a teenager who is not allowed to touch anybody.
Yeah.
Right at the time when they might want to actually start touching people.
And that's the beginning of the movie, basically.
Yeah,
is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other thing that always sticks with me is the opening sequence of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's we're here to see a comic book movie, Auschwitz. Oh, okay. But after that, the opening sequence where there is Jean talking at a Senate hearing, and then there's this echoey hallway where in shadow you have Magneto on one end and Xavier at the other, and you can't see either of them clearly.
Yeah.
You never see their mouths move. And it's so echoey. All you can hear is just this echoey British accent, and you have no idea which one is talking.
Well, I mean, on that note too, I mean, I even I think I played this in the cartoon Kirblog as well, the X-Men series, but for better or worse in terms of whether they are as accurate as possible, the movies established the still amazing all the same performances of Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier and Sir Ian McKellen as Magneto. And which has now basically made Professor X in every interpretation more or less be British, even if that's not technically accurate. The British accent I buy a little bit more on Magneto because of being from Europe, obviously, so it would make sense for him to learn English that way. But their performances, and I mean also Hugh Jackman on Wolverine. I mean, like those three in particular, I think really defined a lot of shit about those characters from everything else.
Well, what Hugh Jackman did for Wolverine in the comics is, so in the 90s, Wolverine was really feral and gross, and it was
Covered
like
in
very
basically,
animalistic.
like scars
And
almost, but not quite.
after Hugh Jackman, Wolverine became sexy. And I'm not even saying this is a downside. All of a sudden, the love triangle between Jean, Scott, and Wolverine makes a lot more sense when they finally start drawing him to look like a person.
The other thing that changed post the Hugh Jackman Wolverine is they stopped giving Logan hair that was the exact same shape as his mask out of costume. That was the thing. For the longest time, he had this hair that could only be done with, I'm going to say, like 20 or 30 minutes with some Aquanet and some like true grit and determination. and somebody finally came to the conclusion, if we just call him by name, the reader will figure out that it's the same person out of the mask.
To be fair, he still has like the split going on a little bit, so it still works.
yeah,
but
but
it's not silly looking anymore. Yeah,
it's less Aquanet and more just a little bit of Dapper Dan or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, it would be akin to if Bruce Wayne were to take two parts of his hair and just kind of stick them up into little triangular spikes on either side and say, "No, I'm not. I'm not Batman. What are you talking about? I just like this silhouette. I, a millionaire, have decided to have idiot hair."
It strikes fear into the hearts of the board members.
Well, it certainly strikes. I mean, for Logan's case, it certainly strikes fear into the hearts of the poor staff at Vidal Sassoon. But it just, it was quite the look. And so when they had Hugh Jackman in it,
which a lot of people I know probably. Actually, I'm curious because Bryan Singer also in that same interview that I was looking at mentioned that a lot of people complained about the casting of Hugh Jackman because they felt he was too tall and a little too good looking for such a feral character.
Well, and at the time, for the interpretation that they had, yes. But here's the thing that I would think is important to remember with that.
Right.
When you talk about a concern of an interpretation and this is true for all of the superhero movies translating from the comic book to the film, for the different media interpretations, I think you have to remember that, especially with something like X-Men, you're talking about a 50, 60-year-long canon.
Yeah.
To say that it's not like it was in the comics, well, that really kind of depended on when. Logan, I'll even say, was probably considered sexy, depending on your interpretation of sexy at the time. Like the original...
in 70s,
exactly.
Wolverine was awkwardly charming whenever he was
dressed up, but he was
dressed
also supposed to be, the kind of rugged anti-hero, somewhere between Western and samurai flick.
Well, I imagine also, not to skip too far ahead to the Wolverine, but the material of the comics where he's in Japan and he meets Yuriko and Mariko, that's like a sympathetic Wolverine that can be sensitive and, be in a relationship with somebody
absolutely.
and not just be lusting. Because with the Jean thing, that was my first introduction to it in the movie because I'm off the heels, hear me out, I'm off the heels of Evolution, where my exposure is Scott and Jean are kids and Logan's a teacher. I didn't know that the Scott, Jean, Logan triangle was a thing at all until the first movie, and I'm like, whoa, what the fuck is going on? It was weird to me.
because she's presented to be maybe 17 in Evolution.
Yeah, and granted, obviously they didn't go there in that series, but
if that's your introduction, that's gonna be weird.
And also, Jean was consistent. Okay, she's smart and cool and is on top of her shit. That was consistent. Scott, to me, in Evolution, people tell me Evolution is arguably one of the only good interpretations of Cyclops that isn't a dickhole. And then, Jason Marsden is a fantastic actor, but he's having to play dickhole Scott in the movie.
Yeah, he gets
and it's
nothing to do in the first one. The second one, he gets kidnapped.
Yeah, and then and third one, he fucking dies in minute 3 of the movie. So it's oh yeah, no, we basically are telling you to root for Logan and Jean. It's just oh, okay, well, whatever, guys.
So you may have been spared this.
Okay.
And lucky you if you were. But there was a point in the 90s and early aughts where Logan was by far the most popular character that they had in the Marvel stable.
Oh, I knew that. Yeah, I
so
couldn't avoid that.
They would have Logan appearing on covers of books that he just was not in. Mm-hmm. Just straight up. He might not even be in that issue. They'll just have him there. I think was...
the most infamous is Anita Blake.
Yeah. Anita Blake.
He's on a cover of Anita Blake, the sexy vampire hunter.
Just nothing to do with it, isn't even there.
Marvel licensed the property and did comics for it, and there was a month where they put Wolverine on the cover of every comics promotional stunt,
Wow.
including Anita Blake.
Right.
I mean, I definitely knew at that era, even though I didn't even know what his name was at the time. I saw Wolverine everywhere, so that was pretty evident
Who is
for
this
sure.
strange aerodynamic man?
Like, yeah,
Who is this guy in Marvel vs. Capcom?
it's so weird to me that now I play Marvel vs. Capcom and now I actually know who all the fucking Marvel characters are years later. What does that say about me? I swear to God. I guess that's kind of all there is to it. I mean, X-Men 1 set the stage. It opened up, the doors to bigger and better things for a lot of better superhero movies. It established a lot of great actors playing these great interpretations of these characters. I think having Wolverine at the forefront made sense, for what it is, and now it's opened up a lot more room
Well,
for
and
the other
what a
characters.
lot of people forget is in the first movie, him being the main character is a total fake out.
Yeah, more or
Because
less.
the
Rogue's
whole
story.
movie is just this is about Wolverine, this is about Wolverine, this is about Wolverine, and then the plan is all about Rogue.
Yeah.
And that's I thought that was a really fun fake out.
Oh yeah, and I mean on the earlier note about sympathetic teen Rogue being more of what I like with her, because I think before that it was more about she's like the sexy
Southern
kind of
belle.
out yeah. But and Anna Paquin who was like she made for a really really good type Rogue character
You wanna hug her, but
immediately
it'll hurt
yeah
because it's Rogue.
immediately you give a shit. Oh sorry, he knocked over my Toriel plushie. Speaking of sympathetic characters, I want to hug. Snail facts.
They haven't played Undertale yet. They will soon, because I'll force them at gunpoint.
I want to play it.
But X2. X2, I think, is of the trilogy of the original. I can't say Singer trilogy because that's not true.
Of the first three.
The first three. X2 is the one that people are like. This is the closest to like a full-fledged good movie start to finish.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and that one's particularly interesting because it is pretty explicitly based on a very specific comic, which is God Love Man Kills.
It's a lot of the Weapon X stuff with like.
It's the what's weird, and this is one of the things the X-Men movies do is they take a storyline that it's based on, and they just pull like key elements from it,
Right.
and then write something new with that.
Oh, yeah,
So
well, I mean,
it's
Days
got
of
this-
Future Past is named directly after the comic, but it's not.
It's got key elements of that
yeah.
And other stories,
Yeah.
but. So in the comics, Stryker is a reverend who is like he's a televangelist,
Right.
who is trying to drum up anti-mutant sentiment, and so they recast him as a military person, which is probably a wise move.
Well,
Right.
and it also makes sense in terms of the era, because when
Oh,
God
yeah.
Loves Man Kills was published, you had
That was
people
the
like
rise of the megachurches.
well, and you had Billy Graham,
Yeah.
you had Jerry Falwell, you had these folks who were just preaching some really disgusting stuff. And then in 2004, three, all right, when
four,
X2
something like
came
that.
out, you had folks in the military who were saying some pretty disgusting stuff or doing some pretty disgusting things as we, as a nation came to find out. And X-Men is always a vehicle by which we turn a lens upon ourselves.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
examine, the legacy virus is HIV, and, the mutants are an analogy for civil rights, and Gene is an analogy for never ever making a good relationship choice ever in your entire goddamn life, Gene. But
I don't know. Kitty Pryde might have her beat.
oh god, okay.
Kitty's probably a little more on top of her shit than Gene. That's
She's
saying
more on
something.
top of her shit, except when she's dating.
That's true.
She has she's dated
She's
Pete
her-
Wisdom, who you probably
No,
are
I
familiar
don't.
with.
No idea.
She's
Cyclops
like
or Colossus, excuse me.
Colossus. That's
alright.
probably her most successful
Yeah.
one. But right now, she's dating Star Lord,
Oh.
and that's not going. It's fun, but it's not going to end well.
It's a phase. Get it? I'm sorry. I swear everybody closes the fucking window. Nightcrawler. I mean, obviously we don't have Alan Cummings come back. I'm sure the new actors who's playing him in Apocalypse is going to be great. But Alan Cummings did a fucking amazing job on Nightcrawler.
Oh god, yes.
For the centuries of fucking makeup that he went through, which was extensively covered in the behind the scenes stuff.
In the
Oh,
Oval
that
Office
opening.
Oh yeah.
just
Oh
so
yeah.
wow.
Absolutely.
That was just. I mean, it was. I think really the first time what they established better than I think they did in the first X-Men movie. In X2, I think they truly established that a single mutant could be a really, really big threat. Even when theoretically, he probably shouldn't be a big threat. I mean, Nightcrawler isn't ultimately a bad guy.
No.
He's a panicked person.
And he's a sweetheart.
Well, in that they've got they're all brainwashed. If
Right.
You recall.
Yeah.
I do, and that's the thing, though. I mean, that gets to raise the threat level, because if you can brainwash a mutant, if you can brainwash somebody who can literally be anywhere at any point, and has, and as long as it's within theoretical visual range, and has immense strength and immense acrobatic ability, and also happens to be Alan Cumming, so you're going to find him disturbingly sexy no matter what happens.
I am invincible.
You're going to, that's, if it were somebody like me, or a Paula Deen, or, same difference, or, a regular human being, no, that's not such a big of a threat. But it's Alan Cumming. Like, you're probably going to end up dating him. So it's a real risk.
I will say one of my favorite scenes, a pair of them for sure, is the twofold strike of Mystique injecting the douchebag security guard with iron, followed promptly by Magneto taking the too much iron out of his blood and escaping.
That was so
that shit was
Escaping
great.
with a BB.
Oh God!
Oh, man.
Magneto. That movie established. I loved the movie versions of specifically Magneto and Mystique.
Oh, yeah.
Because oh God, I can't remember her name, but not
Rebecca
Lettuce.
Romaine Stamos.
yes, yeah,
Romaine Lettuce.
who played her in the original trilogy.
Bizarre character design.
God, but
Like-
she's so fucking cool. That version
Yeah.
of Mystique is so cool.
The thing that I loved about that character design, though, is that was another. It's not dissimilar from Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, where the version that showed up in the movie, they started saying, no, we can actually probably do that in the comics, because there was no real reason for this character to be wearing this weird.
White outfit. And
Well,
shit,
there was
yeah.
the single piece bathing suit with the weird cloth and then the skull belt. Like,
Yeah.
it's sort of an obvious, gosh, I'm probably a bad guy outfit, and like,
Yeah, they
she's more
they
effective to
didn't
not
really
be that.
make her look like the movie, but they certainly gave her a bit more traditionally sexy outfits
Well,
Yeah.
after that.
Gave her more stuff to do with her power, which I think is, kind of central to the character, and so
Yeah.
worth it to do. But I mean, her interpretation was just so much fun, and God, having them together, because I think that Rebecca Romaine Stamos is underrated as an actor.
Yeah, she was really solid in all of them.
She was,
Even
and,
in 3, like she did well. Yeah.
and having her play against Ian McKellen, who of course is this just absolute force as
Yeah.
an actor.
Yeah.
My God, but they're fun. They're fun. And I absolutely agree. The injecting the iron, that was just one of those moments of like, oh, they can do that. Because this is comics. Yeah. That's not how it would work in real life. That's cool, whatever. Like, it
God
was,
almighty. Also, just her delivery on bottoms up after the guy fucking conks out. So good. I love that shit. And I mean, an obvious one. I mean, the Deathstrike Logan fight is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know that iteration of Yuriko is also totally not accurate. She's not really a mutant in the comics and everything.
yeah. No.
But and I'll get to this point about Apocalypse when we get up to that later, or maybe even I'll save it for when I do my thoughts. But I didn't mind that they just made her a mutant. It made things less
Yeah.
complicated for this version of the universe.
I also don't tend to be that much of a purist. Like, as long as you get the core elements, the themes,
Exactly.
the things like that, I really care about. But if you're gonna do something like, oh, she's a mutant instead of a cyborg, well, okay.
Well, in that the core of her character is that she is a anti-Wolverine. Like, she is the
Right.
answer to his powers with the
Yeah.
claws and everything.
And you still get to hit the necessary plot points, the necessary emotional beats.
Yeah.
I think that if you start opening up the whole idea of her being a cyborg and Spiral's body shop and the whole thing,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to tack on another hour and a half to this movie.
Yeah.
It's for brevity's sake. She's a mutant. She was also part of the Weapon X program because of her dad. Whatever, the end.
It was cool because X2 had, I mean, a lot of superhero movies get criticized for having too many villains, but they made use of all three of their major villains in very different ways. And that Deathstrike is the physical one, and that, she's the answer to Wolverine, the big cool action scene with Kelly Hu, who's also fucking fantastic. William Stryker is the head honcho who doesn't have powers, but he's the manipulator, mastermind type
He's
guy.
no less a threat.
And then his son Jason, who does he have like an actual like mutant name, or was he just his son?
I'm pretty sure, given that that's Jason, that's supposed to be Mastermind.
Okay, so that was just that version.
Yeah,
of
and Mastermind is an illusionist.
Right. So, I mean, and granted, he was only a very small part of it, but in the fact that he was the threat that Xavier had to overcome, that was the mental, hurdle to overcome. So they made really interesting, different, and then also, of course, you still have Magneto and the Brotherhood. But they're also having to like kind of work towards a lot of the same things and everything.
Yeah.
Which, whenever the good guys and the Brotherhood have to actually team up. Like I just called the X-Men the good guys. Like you can't just fucking call them the X-Men. When they have to team up against something, which and then X3, same kind of deal, and to some extent, that makes for really good materials. Yeah, X2 overall really solid. X3 Last Stand. Okay.
So I'll get the one nice thing I could say out of the way.
Sure. Go ahead.
Fantastic action sequences.
Oh yeah.
Really well-directed action sequences where you had a good idea what was going on visually on the screen.
Absolutely.
And also, everybody wants to blame Brett Ratner for this movie. He was brought on after they start, last minute that he really wouldn't have had much creative control. Put the blame where it belongs on the producers.
Yeah, for sure.
So just
it's also worth looking at that movie in the context of superhero movies at that point.
Sure.
At that time, you already had Spider-Man, you had all the previous X-Men movies, you had multiple Spider-Man
Yeah,
movies.
two Spider-Man movies at that
Spider-Mans.
point.
Had the first Iron Man movie come out yet at that point?
What? I don't know.
so.
I don't think it was
No,
yet.
I think it was before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was before that, but there had been a degree of success to superhero movies at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, we had two really successful X-Men movies, two super successful Spider-Man movies.
And truly nothing can start honestly fucking things up in a Hollywood production than
Like
previous
success.
successes.
Yeah.
Because, they don't want to match the previous success. Nobody ever wants to match that. They want to exceed it. And so you're going to start getting people getting kind of antsy because, okay, well, we've got this thing and it's sort of an iffy story and it might be good, it might be bad, but, we've got these great actors. We also have Kelsey Grammer.
And we have a deadline.
We have a deadline.
Also, Kelsey Grammer on Beast was fucking great.
Oh, yeah, it was
Oh, yeah.
fantastic.
The thing is,
That was typecasting.
well, and
I mean, really.
everybody does those little fan casting things. Wizard always had their feature, and
Beckett did that for the Dragon Ball movie back in the day. I remember that.
And everybody's pick
Yeah.
for Professor Xavier was always Patrick Stewart
Stewart.
because he's the only bald actor you know. But he's still perfect for it.
Oh, yeah.
But
Actually
also,
true. Phyllis Diller.
Oh my God.
She could break into a whole thing about her husband Thor
but
Why wasn't she Emma?
or
Really?
Fang, not Thor. Excuse me.
but
God, why wasn't she?
and
Emma?
voice-wise, whether everybody thought of it, as soon as they announced Kelsey Grammer's Beast, everybody's like, well, of course.
Well, it's akin to Robert Downey Jr. is gonna be Iron Man. Okay, yeah, all right. That makes sense. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
I felt like such a dipshit when I didn't realize on my Did You Know voice acting videos that Xander helped me co-write a long time ago. In the X-Men one I did, I forgot to mention that George Buza, who was Beast in the 90s cartoon, because they shot half the fucking movies up in Canada for the original trilogy, he was in the first one. He was the truck driver that Rogue meets in the first fucking scene.
Nice.
And I'm like, how did I not fucking put... I was like, every comment on that Did You Know video is like, why did you not mention it? Because I'm stupid, so... yeah, Kelsey was great. I'm going to say this on the positive note of X3. I went to go see it, not opening night, but like the day, the actual day it was out, not like the midnight release of it beforehand, but the main day.
Yeah.
And the whole theater was all X-Men fans. And everybody was cheering at everything. So because of that, I have very fond memories of just being in the theater.
experience of
Yeah.
watching
And
the
when Juggernaut bitch happens, everybody's cheering and laughing their asses off, And considering it is mostly just like dumb, ridiculous action and not a whole lot of like philosophical stuff like the previous ones and like X-Men had been known for by that point.
Yeah,
It lent itself well to that kind of crowd. So for that, I have some fond memories of it. And, and even going back and rewatching, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a couple fun scenes and there's some cool stuff like mixed in there. fully acknowledge it is not a good movie by any fucking means.
Well, it isn't. But you have to remember that it doesn't have to be brilliant. It just has to be fun.
Sure.
Ultimately, it's a summer blockbuster. Now, that said, it had some truly dumb stuff in it.
Oh yeah.
Well, and it also like leaves everything in a bizarre space. Like, how do you go on from there? You killed half of your leads. Well, more than half of your
You
leads.
took
Yeah.
away Magneto's powers, although you have that post-credit scene. Was it post-credit?
Yeah, I know it was just before the
it was
credits.
just- it was just before
Post credits
the
was when he
credits.
wakes up in his brother's body or some shit or whatever the fuck
He
that was.
wakes up in the John Doe body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was peculiar. I will say that I really did enjoy the idea of the Phoenix just actually being Jean's full extent of her powers, that she's actually just crazy freaking powerful.
Right.
I did like the idea of it's just telekinesis on a molecular level.
Right.
Like, that I thought was a really fun idea, but they...
It isn't the Phoenix from the comics.
No.
certainly.
And I think they didn't... The idea that they had, they didn't give it enough room to breathe.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it really feels like they've got two ideas for a movie that could be good, and they just mushed them together, and it,
I think if
it's
it were...
just... It really is an example of the overbloatedness that they somehow managed to avoid in the previous two, despite how big the cast was.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is with it, and this is kind of leading into the next couple of movies, is I think what the intention was, is it felt like they were going to end this, which is unfortunate because it still felt like we never got like that much of like a true X-Men movie with the team getting to do everything together. It was a little, X2 came close, but everything was very divided, and it was a little bit of a different kind of experience.
Cyclops was off, and you got the big Wolverine showpiece.
Yeah,
and
but
the team never
I
got
think
Right.
that if X3 were out, 5-7 years later,
yeah.
they probably would have made X3 1 and X3 2, or it would have been X-Men whatever,
X-Men: The Last Stand Part 1.
X-Men
Yeah,
The Last
yeah.
Stand Part 2. Akin to Harry Potter, akin to Mockingjay, really to let the story breathe.
Right.
I think that unfortunately, they really thought, okay, well, it's time to wrap it up because it is a trilogy,
Yeah.
The mega franchise hadn't happened yet.
For sure, yeah. So I guess they just because from what I understood, the plan was that after that they were going to do the prequel movies, and it was planned to have.
Well, they were going to do the Wolverine one,
and the Magneto
one,
right.
and there were talks about an Xavier one and all that.
Okay, yeah. Why and when
But
which
yeah,
basically
the two big ones that went into production were Wolverine and Magneto.
right. And the funny thing is like then because I guess transitioning into X-Men Wolverine. It seemed like when they started on that, even though they were like, "Oh, it's going to be in continuity," sort of, like it, because my ultimate rebuttal to that is like, well, fucking Sabretooth. So why is it then if we have this whole perfectly acceptable backstory, I guess, of Logan of James Howlett and Sabretooth being knowing each other for all that time. Then why the fucking X-Men 1, when they fight in the first scene in the snow, they don't have some big fucking oh, Logan, it's been a long time, right, Jimmy, or whatever.
I think the point on that is that the Weapon X program did so much damage to Logan's brain that he might not have realized or whatever.
But then wouldn't have Sabretooth had something...
His memory at the end of the movie, too.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Sabretooth not knowing, that's...
And granted, different actors and whatever,
Yeah,
but I mean, they've
but
changed
also
them.
it's X-Men. Retcons are part of the thing,
Yeah.
so...
So I guess in a way, what it kind of looks like is that the trilogy is just its own thing. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then it just ends with that. And then because Origin, as far as I know, has been still in line with everything else that's happened in the recent movies.
So, well, it's not.
Not 100%?
There's a couple things that contradict it because Emma's in there.
Right. Well, yeah. Which
Emma's
that
in there
was
much-
and Scott was in there. Yeah.
So they're
God.
just quietly ignoring X-Men Origin, which is probably the wisest.
Right. Yeah.
Well, now it's going to be interesting to see because aren't they doing another?
They're doing one more Wolverine movie, as far as I know,
Yeah, but
and
the
then
second
that's it
Wolverine
for Hugh
movie
Jackman.
also was so standalone.
It's true.
The only thing it wasn't was it was kind of a sequel to Wolverine's arc in X3, which I actually thought was...
Oh yeah, so I guess that is the Wolverine.
but that's the
kind of. Yeah, I know, but is that kind of? Does that take place after X3? I guess.
Explicitly, he keeps dreaming about Jean.
That's right. I forgot. Oh, okay. Well, we're skipping ahead a little bit.
'cause
But
the way
let's just talk about the Wolverine
the
anyway.
clever thing I
whatever,
thought
yeah.
they did with Wolverine, since X-Men Origin Wolverine's not very good.
Right.
It is a bloated mess.
With crazy
It doesn't make
pacing.
much sense.
My God,
Yeah.
the pacing on
Oh,
that movie.
yeah.
It's just
Although-
stupid. It's just
but
there's a lot of
do you wanna
stupid
call it
shit
one
in
thing?
it.
It
One
is
positive thing.
weirdly fun to watch. It is like one of those like glorious train wreck movies.
But one positive thing, gotta call out. Troy Sivan as young James Howlett. Really good.
And I liked, what's his name is Sabretooth. Who was that?
Oh, the new guy that took over for him in that movie. I don't remember him either.
Oh God.
With the short hair.
no,
He was good.
He
yeah.
was fun. Like I have no issues with most of the cast in that, but it's just the movie was a mess.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if I had to pick an X-Men train wreck movie to watch, I would pick X3
Yeah.
over
No,
Wolverine.
it's like both of them would make a great double feature for Bad Movie Night. But I'm totally the Bad Movie Night guy.
Right.
So like, I'm not watching this because I like it.
Right.
I'm watching it because
Yeah.
I love stupid stuff.
Well,
Matt
I-
actually told me that
One of my
Schindler's
favorite
List was a
movie-
romantic comedy.
One of my favorite movies is Wizards of the Lost Kingdom 2. It's not good, but I love watching it.
I love watching Dragon Ball Evolution.
I absolutely
So.
loved.
Ironically,
At that point, that was the
ironically.
best on-screen Peter Parker.
It was fucking Justin, what's his name in that movie?
He was a great Peter Parker.
Yeah.
For me, it was Three Ninjas Strike Back.
Oh my god. Well, I guess before we go to because I want to save first class, let's actually go into the Wolverine since that does have to do with the topic. So I actually I liked the Wolverine.
Oh, I did too,
yeah.
I forgot that it was after X3. That does make
kinda
sense.
it's a lot of fun. It kind of fumbles the landing.
Right.
If I'm just landing, I'd say even the second act kind of gets a little bit sticky. There's some points where you're like, oh, and it does have some pretty spectacular. Was this the Wolverine? Which one was the one where
the Wolverine is where
The
he goes to
Wolverine's
Japan.
one in Japan.
I'm not thinking. I'm thinking.
You're thinking of Origin?
with the Howling Wolverine.
Oh,
Oh,
God.
jeez, yeah. The fact that the writers do not realize that Wolverines are badgers,
They're
not
not.
wolves.
They're not wolves.
Whoops.
No.
There is a great article by there's an
It's
X-Men
Jay
podcast called
Edelman.
Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, which if you want to get into X-Men books, this is a great primer for it.
Okay.
But one of the writers of that has this hilarious review of X-Men Origin Wolverine, and it's just tearing the movie to shreds and having a blast. Like clearly,
Yeah.
Jay loves and hates this movie, and it all like
It's
the
hilarious.
love and the hatred just all comes across in this review. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever
So,
read.
with regards to the Wolverine, the second movie, I think one of the really best parts of that movie to me was the parts with before Logan learns any sort of Japanese. Canonically to the story, there are plenty of parts that are in Japanese that have no subtitle, and I thought that was such an important little bit.
Yeah.
If the viewer is theoretically not supposed to understand Japanese, if the character is not supposed to understand Japanese, then neither should you.
Yeah.
You shouldn't get the pass of
Yeah, because Wolverine is the point of view. So
Yeah,
he doesn't
yeah,
understand
for
it.
sure.
So I really enjoyed that. It's unfortunately it suffered under the first movie because the general knowledge at this point was, wow, the Wolverine movie was just so bad, and
So they've got so much to make up for. So
Right.
much they have to get over so much bad will.
I had an interesting perspective because I skipped Origin completely. I heard so much bad shit about it, I didn't see it. And I missed First Class when it was in theaters. So I saw the Wolverine before I saw X-Men Origin and before I saw First Class.
Okay.
And then before Days of Future Past came out, I just marathoned all of them.
Okay.
Except for the Wolverine, just because I had just seen that. But I went in basically only hearing the legends of how awful Origin was, and I knew a little bit about the Wolverine Goes to Japan storyline, just knowing enough
So
about
much
like Deathstrike and all that.
Ultimately, it's just kind of pleasantly surprising.
Yeah.
It had a I know all okay. What I do know next to nothing about is Silver Samurai. Most people I hear tell me he's kind of a lame-o character.
He's pretty lame, but even as lame as he is, they butcher that character.
I kind of liked what they went with the guy in the armor. I was like, that's kind of interesting. Okay, like
And that's
it
a
was
case
okay.
of them mushing it's one of the cases where they're mushing a lot of characters
I
together.
figured, yeah.
And they
just sort of
also do a couple fake outs because if you know, like, the story that's based on canonically, there's no big robot at the end.
Right, yeah.
I think it's worth noting, though, that that's one of those scenarios where they probably took a character and said, okay, we want to introduce this character, but we don't think that enough people have probably read this book, this story. They know this character, so let's do something that's going to be pretty palatable to somebody who maybe isn't particularly familiar with the character. to
Yeah,
begin
yeah,
with.
yeah.
Yeah, well, and old friend of Wolverine who turns out to be a scumbag trying to manipulate Wolverine
They can literally-
is the basis of so many Wolverine stories
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
comics.
yeah.
So
A basis.
it's very true to his solo stuff.
And also, I mean, the scene where like they literally take out the claw, like they declaw Wolverine, and then he's left with the bone ones again, was like that scene is like fucking terrifying. It was
Yeah,
very well
that's-
executed.
That calls back to the comics in the 90s. It was Fatal...
There's Fatal Attractions where Magneto rips out the metal from his skeleton.
Right.
Takes all the metal out of his body.
And then there's a later follow-up where now that his... and that's where it's revealed that he has bone claws underneath.
Right.
Which was a big retcon, but honestly makes a lot of sense.
Well, they said, the bone... that the space is ossified because of his healing factor, and so that was how he was gonna, continue. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But
Nice hand wave.
then later in the comics, there's this incredibly 90s villain called Cyber, and he has hallucinogenic poison in his fingertips. So whenever he scratches Wolverine, the artists get to draw really weird stuff.
Cool.
And he smashes the claws on one of his hands, so it's very evocative of that as well.
Okay.
So that's them kind of again taking bits and pieces from other stories and transplanting them into
Okay.
what is essentially an adaptation of the first Wolverine miniseries.
Right.
Unfortunately, what it doesn't involve, and I think this is a real miss, is him hunting a rabid bear that's been poisoned by a hunter. Yeah.
At the very beginning of the miniseries. So, okay, he's referring to the very first Wolverine miniseries, which
Actually,
is really good.
Yeah.
It's Frank Miller as an artist at like the peak of
cool,
him as
okay.
an artist.
Yeah.
But paired with Chris Claremont writing, and they go really well together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that
it's-
the story of him going to Japan?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the Wolverine miniseries. It's a 4-issue mini, and the bulk of the Wolverine is based on that.
Gotcha,
That's
okay.
where Yuriko. Well, Yuriko was established before that, but that's where
Mariko.
Mariko is before that.
Yukio was the cool chick with the
Is
pink hair.
the kind of Daredevil one.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's introduced in the miniseries. That's
Okay.
where she's from. The old, the old guy who summons him there, it's Yuriko's father is
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah.
Although he's still the antagonist, but he has a very different role in the book.
Right.
That's where it starts really deviating.
Okay.
So it's a movie.
Yeah, no,
was
it's a fun
fun.
ride.
Yeah.
It was a cool story. I guess opening up a little bit, since you have reminded me now, that's right, it was in continuity with X3. The setup at the end with it to tie into what became First Class was the reason.
Days of Future Past?
Oh, sorry, yeah, Days of Future Past, I should say. Was what further reminded me, like, no, this doesn't fix everything because there's still so many fucking things that don't add up or whatever.
To be fair, though, plot holes and retcon are kind of the
Well, and
that's the hydrogen of the X-Men
Yeah.
universe.
Unfortunately.
I'll get to my thoughts on that when we get to the
Days of Future Past, yeah.
But before that, we've got First Class.
Yeah.
First Class.
Which-
To date, so far, and this is nothing against Days of Future Past, but that so far is my favorite X-Men movie.
I
First
think
Class.
I
Absolutely
agree.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought
It's-
Michael Fassbender was amazing, and
It is so stylish, and it's really like so all the other ones were very clearly sci-fi.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
started drifting more into traditional superhero stuff as it went.
Yeah.
But it's all in the sci-fi trappings, and then First Class puts it in like kind of a bizarre choice to do spy trappings with it.
Yeah.
And it worked really well.
I think the thing that if you had come to me and said, "All right, Kevin Bacon is going to be terrifying," I would have said, "You mean
Oh,
like
by the way, Kevin Bacon's in this movie. We didn't advertise this at
No,
all.
and
Well,
he's
like,
good.
Kevin
He was
Kevin
good.
Bacon is going to be terrifying." I would have said, "You mean like as a person, or like am I 6 degrees away from death? Like, what's, what exactly is going on? And he was amazing.
Yeah, he was really good.
Just the scene with young Eric in the concentration camp where he's just glib about killing the kid's mother in front of him. Just,
Yeah. And what's the Sebastian?
So Sebastian
Shaw.
Shaw,
Right,
it's
right.
a
This is-
very
oh, yeah.
loose adaptation.
He is
Right, yeah,
not
yeah.
the same Sebastian Shaw that's in the comics, which I think Sebastian Shaw in the comics is terribly entertaining, but is
He'd be hard to adapt to. He is one giant BDSM metaphor.
right.
So there's, the Hellfire Club, and they're all in like sexy Victorian garb, and there's a whole ton of BDSM stuff going on with
Yeah,
that.
right.
And his power is the more you hit him, the stronger he gets.
Right.
So
Which really has some strange connotations with
It's
that.
also
that-
worth
that I
noting
can
that-
understand why they didn't tackle that.
yeah, it's also worth noting that the comic book version of Shaw is one of those characters where I was legitimately surprised to find out that he's supposed to be straight. They legitimately surprised because they camp
Oh,
him
he's
up so
fancy.
much. He's very fancy, but they camp him up so much. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's the 70s. It's supposed to be kind of a. Unfortunately, there were a lot of queer villains at the time, and their queerness was part of what made them a villain, or whatever. But I find out that he has a kid now. Not to say that gay folks can't have kids or queer folks can't, but he's supposed to be apparently straight. That was shocking to me.
In fairness, if you go back and read the original appearances of him, that like the Dark Phoenix saga
Yeah.
stuff, he's a lot less mincy.
And that's true. And
Than he gets
he's a lot less
in
mincy.
his appearances in the 90s. He's pretty mincy.
But and in the Dark Phoenix, he's a lot less mincy and a whole lot more lecherous. He's actually gross and terrifying.
Huh.
But they did a very different interpretation of him for First Class, and it was just knock out of the park. Good. I'm gonna say that I had
Phenomenal cast
Oh, yeah.
all around. in
Yeah,
that.
Michael Fassbender as Magneto, James McAvoy on Charles, Jennifer Lawrence on Mystique, who took the role even further.
Yeah,
I mean,
Holt as Beast was really fun.
Yeah.
yeah. He's awesome.
I think, whereas I try to be super positive with the movies that maybe don't shine so well in the lens of history. For this one, there's a couple missteps. I think, unfortunately, January Jones did not have a lot to work with. as
Yeah,
Emma,
that's
which
a
is
shame.
not a reflection of her ability as an actress. She's a tremendous actor. I just think that they didn't give her a lot.
The
They
X-Men
kind of-
movies have kind of a tradition of having the silent lackeys.
Yeah.
And so it's Mystique in the first one. Mystique and Toad barely speak. And Mystique has the one line, which is really powerful when she says it as a result of that. The second one has Deathstrike, who barely speaks.
Only has
Third one
man.
has multiple man.
Yeah. And
I wouldn't count Multiple Man as that one, but
yeah, like the third
but
one.
those characters are pretty
but
quiet.
yeah, and Kevin Bacon's lackeys in this kind of fall into that. You got Riptide, who I don't think ever speaks.
Yeah,
You got
Azazel, who's
Barely.
another real the character choices in this movie are so bizarre. They work,
Yeah.
but they are bizarre.
And then next movie, dead.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah.
all gone. It's like, oh, okay. Well,
But yeah, Emma.
that one, that's the biggest disappointment is not even like the interpretation, just the fact that oh, there goes Emma. Well,
Yeah.
that sucks because she didn't have a
lot to
If
work
you've seen
with.
our cartoons, Emma is like one of our favorite
Oh,
characters.
yeah.
That's no secret.
And
here.
my only real exposure to her as a character is from Wolverine and the X-Men and a little bit of the Uncanny X-Men not audio comic, the motion comic.
Okay.
Okay. Was that Astonishing?
Sorry, Astonishing.
Yeah,
not
that was the
Uncanny.
Joss Whedon run.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
she
right.
was
Which was
He
tremendously
did a
good.
great
Yeah.
job
Yeah.
on that.
And so I know enough about her, and I like from my own firsthand experience, and secondhand I know that she's like a really massive, important character. If anything, maybe even also from your guys' cartoons, the fact that she's so prevalent all the time, and I get there's a lot to her. So that's one choice from why just wasted so easily, I mean
I think the other thing that I have to address it. Maybe it's just one of those fandom elephant things.
Sure.
I had a real problem with killing off Darwin. I had a real problem.
Who is
So-
Darwin?
Darwin
is the kid who gets killed when he's
Oh,
got
when
the
he
power
explodes?
to survive anything.
That's right. Okay.
So
And-
that alone is weird, but there is
I forgot him and I forgot Havoc for a second.
there's just the genre thing.
Havoc
Right.
is just infinitely forgettable in every possible
in
way.
Hollywood, there is this trope of there's the black guy who's just there to get killed, who shows how serious everything is.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the same time, there's also the trope of we're going to kill the most powerful thing to show that the bigger bad is coming. Think Heroes, which is basically just X-Men with
Or
numbers
anytime
piled
a new villain shows up in Star Trek, they beat up Worf
Well, I mean, everybody
because
hates
but he's supposed to be the most intimidating one.
Worf. Sometimes, I'm just saying, sometimes it's consensual. Just want to get that out there. Just want to. Hey, the mother of his kid.
Welcome to the Star Trek Kirblog today.
Oh, I could go on.
I'm sure.
But what's also
Yeah.
weird regarding there's the black guy who's just there to get killed. He's not black in the comics.
No.
He's Mexican.
Okay.
And so it feels like they made him black just so that they could kill him. Just following Hollywood rules, and that makes me extra uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's
about
mildly
this,
strange.
Where
But
it's
I mean,
it actually made me a little uncomfortable.
guy's power set is very specifically, I can survive anything. And so I get the idea of, from the story, well, let's come up with a thing that he can't survive. And,
And it's a big moment of development for everybody, and it's like, holy shit, guys! Wow, this is crazy.
And in the comics, he's even touched by the goddess of death, and he becomes immune to death.
Oh, is that the one that Thanos is trying to hook up with, or is that a different death?
Oh no, this is the Norse goddess of death.
Oh, okay, got it.
Who's
Th-
going to be
thanks,
in the new movie.
Thanks, Marvel. Carry on.
Hela is going to be in the new movie. Hela is, who is Hela in the new movie?
Oh, they just.
Oh, in Thor Ragnarok?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it's Kristen Chenoweth because it isn't, but I like that idea.
Oh, God.
Right?
At the time that we're recording this, they've announced more details about Jeff Goldblum is in Thor Ragnarok and Michael Keaton is going to be in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Did they actually announce that?
Yes,
that
they
was
did.
a rumor for a while.
Yeah,
and
no,
they
it's
said he pulled
announced.
out.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're using.
Did they announce who he is?
Chameleon and Vulture, who they're using. I'm assuming he's. Oh no, sorry, not Chameleon. That was my vote.
Vulture?
Tinker.
Tinker.
And
Oh.
Vulture. He's probably Tinkerer.
Okay.
I'm down with that.
Yes, so am I.
So, yeah.
X-Men. Yeah.
who
Yeah,
cares about
no, First Class. First Class I love to death because I felt like, even more so than X2, which I do still enjoy, First Class was the first X-Men movie where it felt like the X-Men team getting to do X-Men things
Oh yeah,
together.
at the end it felt like an
And
X-Men team, and they had, as a total comic book nerd, in the flight suits were totally the Silver Age
Absolutely,
X-Men costumes,
yeah.
and that
Yeah.
made me so
and
happy.
they didn't look dumb. They didn't
No,
look
they
like
looked
too
great.
goofy or whatever. It was perfect. Yeah, and I was like,
think
I'm down with
the
this.
thing that I liked the most about First Class is that it was a complete packet. The story fit within its own parameters. It had
Yeah,
a
you
beginning,
didn't
a
have to
middle, and an
know the other
end.
movies.
And more so, you were not left with the. You were left wondering, well, where the hell are they going to go with this?
You
Right.
feel like
But-
they could go somewhere,
Right, but it
not
wasn't
the-
that they had to.
Yeah.
And that was so much because, remember, at the time, they were being sort of cagey about whether or not it was just a full-on reboot or whether or not something that fits within the continuity of the previous movies or whether they were going to ever do
Yeah,
this
they
one
were
again.
really careful not to, like, in all the press releases, they circle around commenting on that so much.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Probably because they just didn't know yet.
Well,
because
they were waiting to see how well it did.
and going back, because I think isn't basically the First Class. First Class is what mostly the Magneto movie or the Origin movie, and I'm assuming like bits and pieces of the Charles movie
Oh, yeah, I
became together as one
yeah,
thing.
Because,
yeah,
I mean, they had
definitely
half
the
the whole-
Magneto movie.
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised if because in the opening, the first half of the movie,
Yeah.
there are two parallel stories. There's Charles Xavier
With
being
Raven.
a wasp learning responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and then there is Eric Lencher, Nazi Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure most of those scenes are just
Oh, man.
pulled from the old.
Yeah,
But let's
yeah.
just go ahead and take a moment and table and say
Okay,
Holy
the
crap,
scene in the bar.
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Holy crap! That is
Like,
the best scene in the movie.
I remember when that scene finishes and he just takes the drink, and the audience just exploded into applause. Like, it was just as one, it's like, yeah, let's go find some more Nazis to fight. Like, it was amazing. Like, you know, and okay, yes, do that.
Yeah,
But,
like the audience was quiet through
Yeah.
that whole scene.
Yeah.
Like, that was so. That scene is just perfection.
Yeah, super well done, absolutely.
oh,
And the fucked up family of Charles, Hank, and Raven.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, and those actors' performances on them in particular, like I've loved those characters in the other interpretations I've seen before. The First Class brought my appreciation for Charles, Beast, Mystique, Magneto to a whole new level.
I
Like,
thought that Nicholas Hoult was just spectacular.
Oh,
It's-
yeah.
It's one of those ones where it's become kind of a reference point character for me, where it's like, oh, Nicholas Hoult, oh, he was in Mad Max. Oh man, Beast was in Mad Max.
Yeah.
Beast is in this other. It's like, that's so cool. That's so great. Like, he brought a pathos to the character that I don't think I'd ever really seen before, because they always kind of gloss over. At some point, he turns blue. Like, okay, sure, but this guy like legitimately had an accident happen.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing, huge life-changing moment, and I think that's one of those. It's easy to kind of skip over that part, especially when you think maybe he isn't quite as big of a deal as the other ones, but he's just as central of a part of
Oh,
First
sure,
Class.
yeah.
It's just-
And it's interesting because, like, because I've brought this up in every fucking Mayorville Kirblog so far, I always have to talk about at least one ship. And at least in the movie universe, it has made me be like, no, Magneto's bad for you. I know that he makes good points, Mystique, but god damn it, Beast is the one. I'm fucking telling you, god damn it. Because anytime I would see, because Nick Hoult and Jennifer Lawrence, like, their chemistry as those versions of the
Oh, yeah.
characters is so fucking lovable.
Well, and at the same time, I actually think that Charles and Eric.
That's
they're-
that too for sure.
Well,
yeah.
now what Matt will probably speak more eloquently to this than I will, but it does talk about it's not necessarily a romantic relationship between Charles.
But it's
and
a
Eric.
very powerful relationship.
Yeah, it's a very important relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The how to put it, like, the most important relationship of your life doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic one. And I think they really nail that, where just, you could ship them however you want, but at least in the movies that never quite goes there.
Yeah.
But there is never any question that regardless of what romantic interest they may have, it will never be as important of a relationship as their relationship with each other.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though it goes sour, it's still the most important relationship either of them will ever have.
Right.
Yeah, and which I guess good point to lead in on Days of Future Past, which I just rewatched, as I mentioned before, like not too long ago, and I hadn't seen it since I watched it in theaters, and I watched the Rogue cut just because I was
Oh,
curious.
just the other day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
I haven't seen that one yet.
it's doesn't add a whole lot more.
It's just they just toss in a couple extra cutscenes. Right?
Yeah, more or less. But honestly, I get why they as much as I love Anna Paquin, excuse me,
It was already pretty long.
yeah, and well, it's not that even that it was so much longer. It's just like they basically changed it. So spoilers, but whatever. I mean, if you've seen the movie already, you know it. Basically, when Kitty gets cut by Wolverine when he's like freaking out because he sees Stryker, the addition is they go to the Xavier Mansion because Bobby somehow remembered that Rogue was being experimented there. They go there, get her out, bring
So
her
she
back
can
so that
take
she
her powers.
Bobby sacrifices himself so that they can escape from the mansion because there's like sentinels and shit there instead of him sacrificing himself just before they go in and are about to kill all of them inside the temple and everything.
Okay.
So and then basically there's just some alternate shots of Rogue being where Kitty is and Kitty just being on the sideline and but that's basically, and there's like a couple little extra things here and there, but that's pretty much the only main difference. That aside, so I rewatched it again, and I definitely do still like First Class more, but in watching it again, I still really, really like Days of Future Past a lot.
So Days of Future Past has one of my favorite moments in the X-Men movie series.
Okay.
Specifically, Kitty going through or not, excuse me, Kitty, Mystique going through the airport and everybody's talking to her because it's just Charles.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody's just looking at her and she's like, it is this wonderfully freaky moment because everybody's just, addressing her and it's just the same conversation happening the entire time. And she doesn't know, she knows what's going on, but like, how do you react to that? How do you have this moment? It does do a good job. Days of Future Past does a good job of kind of doing a bit of a reflection of creepy Xavier, which happened in the comics in the later 60s, early 70s. There's a very famous scene with the X-Men fans who will remember this, where out of nowhere, and I mean out of fucking nowhere, Xavier has this moment of introspection where nobody should know that he has a crush on Jean, just like everybody else.
And this is back when Jean is drawn to be like 14. She was drawn to be really young in the early
Right. Now, she wasn't 14. I think she was
just like 16.
Either way, it's still creepy.
It's still creepy.
Well, absolutely, and abusive and gross.
And they never came up again.
Good.
It's one of those ones where the dialogue was done completely separately from the visuals. They're just two very separate processes in creating the comic, and so who knows how that got put in there. But oh man alive, that is super creepy.
Well, and if you read that era, they tried throwing her in every possible
Just
love
to see who's
triangle
gonna fit.
until it
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah.
So that said, what Days of Future Past does do for the 70s version of Charles is kind of touch on the fact that that power set, if you get right down to it, is really off-putting, and you kind of can't blame Eric for putting on the weird condom helmet.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, I can understand how this would have happened.
Well, because it's an interesting jump from him being totally irresponsible with his powers in First Class to being overly irresponsible in the extreme opposite of, like, I don't want them at all. I don't want to fucking do this at all. I would rather just have my legs back and not be a mutant, period, because I just can't deal with it right now with the shit he's going through. Right. The other thing is, I implied a little bit about this earlier, but just worth stating here again. The people who tell me Days of Future Past fixed, quote unquote, everything about the timeline of the X-Men movies absolutely did not. No. And you know what? I went in being told that, and yet I was not disappointed to see that it didn't. Because the fact of the matter is, as just a standalone piece, just like how First Class was, it is a solid movie with a very good, straightforward theme. And the bonus, whereas First Class is you don't have to know anything, in Days of Future Past, knowing a lot more and seeing the parallel original trilogy cast and the new cast being together, as in like in the same movie, not in the same scenes, was so incredibly cool. Like just like from a fan service standpoint. And going back to the other subject a second ago of the relationship between Charles and Magneto, is seeing Professor X and Magneto in the future timeline, like completely over their shit and being like, we care about each other, we're fighting for the right cause together, like truly, and God, how stupid were we as kids?
Let's come together for the kids.
Yeah, and then like with you look back at as they themselves described, like we need to be put together when we couldn't have been further apart.
Right.
And seeing that parallel with the this now completely new separate timeline that has changed because of the Bolivar Trask incident and Mystique's choice and what she does and everything, and the mutants being there in the 70s.
I'm going to go ahead and say that probably the thing that really changed history was Hugh Jackman's butt. Because the entire time was like, hold on, let's stop and look at that for a minute.
I did sleep. I slept with her many times, but that was the old me. I just got here like 20 seconds ago.
That was a fun scene. But Bolivar Trask though, just thinking, oh my God, Peter Dinklage.
Oh yeah.
Holy
shit.
He rocked the
so good.
the 70s hair.
Oh, and the mustache and everything.
What I loved about that, there's so... Whenever you do a nostalgia piece like that, or it's a period piece, what this one does that most doesn't is they're not afraid to do the stuff from the 70s that's not popular retro 70s stuff. Like, they let Xavier have, like, Ron Jeremy hair.
Yeah. It was just shitty looking.
You know, they were not afraid to go with the looks that are not popular retroactively, but are still very true to the 70s. And I really appreciated that. That was fun.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing is, like, I mean, because we had dinner before this and we were talking about how what's really cool about the McAvoy Fassbender era movies and X-Men now is that they're decades. First Class was 60s, Days of Future Past was 70s, and the future, obviously. Apocalypse is going to be 80s, from what I've been told, and which means that whatever comes next, whether it's X-Force or something else, will be 90s. I am so fucking okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, no, their way of, like, making them period pieces, both First Class and Days of Future Past, was
they
very,
kinda
very
wrapped them
effective.
around some key events.
Yeah,
And
the bit about the JFK assassination, like, because he was one of us, I was like, oh my god, I forgot about that until I watched it
Yeah.
again. I was like, that's a cool little, like,
Well, and to have,
surprising detail.
The president is Nixon, for God's sake. It's like, it's Nixon.
Great impersonator, that
Oh,
guy.
yeah, absolutely. But it's Nixon. And so, you're left thinking, because we have the liberty of being in the 21st century and thinking, oh my God, Richard Nixon, Watergate, all of this. This is pre-that. So, who knows? Nobody's immediately thinking of Richard Nixon as a bad person, or maybe not a great guy, but as this, the president who stepped down. You don't have that, and so you get to have the lens of the future, but you're looking back at the past.
the audience knows one thing, but the characters in the movie have
don't
a
know
very
that.
different perspective.
The other interesting thing in regards to, like, the meta and the whole timeline debacle and everything is what I forgot about is, again, this interview I watched with Bryan Singer about Apocalypse coming out, is he was talking about how now this is a new history that has been made for mankind because of the incident that happened where Mystique, or rather Magneto, almost kills the president and the entire, Secretary of Defense and everything, and then Mystique is the one who steps in and intervenes and prevents that from happening. Which also, on a side note, that scene is my favorite, where she has to make that decision. Charles is trying to plead with her, the alternate timeline of the fucking remaining last line all being literally ripped apart. It's fucking dark and terrifying. And just before the beam hits and kills them, she drops the gun in the past timeline and saves everything. The music is, like, really, it's like fucking amazing. It's such a powerful moment. And that moment in now this new history, as far as I know, in the trilogy, that was never something that was a thing. So the fact that, like, that is now, like, this kind of guiding, new
Historical thing.
Yeah, that's
Because it was
it's a
very public.
yeah, like the fact, and because even in Apocalypse, there's a scene apparently, I think it's a little preview I watched where Scott is in school and they're taking a class where they're talking about mutants, because this is a thing that happened 10 years ago, and most of you guys were a kid, so, like, they're treating it as, like, it's part of, like, human history.
Yeah.
And it's really fucking cool.
It's remember where you were when the Berlin Wall fell.
Yeah, because I think if I'm remembering right, in the trilogy, that was the point where mutants were revealed, was, like, during that stuff,
so
right?
X-Men were known in the first movie, sometime before the first movie.
Okay.
Because the first movie all
barely
revolved.
just. I think
It was public knowledge because the inciting incident of the first movie was the Mutant Registration Act being passed through Senate.
Oh, that's
Right.
right. Yeah.
So they were public, but it's really vague about as of when,
Okay.
and it's implied that it's pretty recent.
Okay. Yeah. So fair. Well, so the point is, like, that this version
yeah,
it
this
happened way
seems
earlier.
like it happened like a decade or so before.
Which therefore, I mean, over the next several decades before it catches up to where I guess, X1 would have taken place, which would have been early 2000s. All this new, I mean, for fuck's sake, that implies, like, are you guys trying to tell me that, like, pre the events of X1, the apocalypse shit happened? Like, there's no fucking way.
No.
Like, then
Yeah.
they could have
Well,
planned
it's,
for all
it's,
that.
It's
yeah.
a divergent timeline.
Yeah.
Squarely, it does not fix the timeline.
So,
it just makes a new
The
one.
only thing that has happened in both timelines is going to be First Class and everybody's favorite
Wolverine
X-Men
Origins.
Origins Wolverine.
Yep. Yeah.
And also Star Trek Enterprise.
And Deadpool, because
And Deadpool.
Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool is established in Wolverine, so,
So
Oh, yeah, that's true.
and maybe X3 No, that all happens in the previous. Man.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
There's a
Oh.
loop. It
And-
doesn't fix anything.
Anyway,
But
it does establish a new timeline, a la the new Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
But the way I see that, it's not so much fixing everything, but it's making sense of everything.
yeah.
And it reminds me, and I don't expect anybody else to be familiar with this, but some of the listeners might be. There's a great big crossover, like the biggest X-Men crossover storyline of the 80s was Inferno.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And Inferno was this giant, brilliantly done Band-Aid on continuity. As they wrapped up so many storylines, and in doing so, there was a ton of retcons, and there had been this mess because they killed off Jean, and then they introduce Madeline Pryor, who looks exactly like Jean, and Scott gets married, and then Jean shows up, and Scott abandons Jean and his baby.
No, abandons Madeline.
Abandons Madeline and his baby to go visit Jean, but won't tell Jean about Madeline, and it's just all this mess. And
This is
it's
very important, though. Something that we learn about Jean and Madeline, and in retrospect, right, is that Madeline knows how to open a door.
Oh no! Open a hatch.
Open a hatch.
Yeah.
Very
There's
Scott.
this,
Very
this
very
great
angry.
line where
Madeline's
Jean
a
is
pilot.
trying to Madeline is pilot, and Jean and Cyclops and Jean separate from Madeline because Jean does not know about Madeline. Jean is trying to telepathically push a button inside a plane to open the hatch from the outside. And Cyclops is yelling at her and says, "You should know how to do this," and calls her Madeline. And she's like, "Who's Madeline?" And he has this hilarious, she's someone who knows how to open a hatch.
Oh my god.
It's one of the most bizarre lines of dialogue.
Amazing.
I hope Scott says something about opening a hatch to Jean in Apocalypse, because that would make me fucking happy now.
There is no
but
Madeline Pryor in the movies yet, guys. but that'll
Inferno
happen.
Give it time.
does
No, that's
this,
gonna be next.
this
Watch.
great job of taking a lot of continuity problems along the lines of what we've got with Wolverine Origins and X3, where there's just these dangling things that nobody really wants to address.
Yeah.
And it did this fantastic job of just tying them all together and leaving you in a place where you can move forward.
Right.
Right. It doesn't
And
fix anything.
It
necessarily.
it doesn't undo anything.
But it says, all right, this solves just enough.
Yeah, we've
that we
tied
can-
off the fraying ends so that they're not going to unravel further. Let's move forward. And I feel like Days of Future Past, the movie, was that for the movies.
Well, because I think what the intention was supposed to be, it still doesn't totally make sense, but I think the Logan's ending in that movie, well, I guess because he has two different endings technically, but his first ending when he wakes up in the mansion
Yeah.
and everybody's alive and everybody's okay, I think what that was supposed to be is like the everything gets fixed new version of the trilogy's ending, I think, and then going back to when Mystique, who's now disguised as young William Stryker, fishes Logan out of the fucking ocean or whatever, and then leads up into whatever's happening next, is then what's leading into Apocalypse, and then that timeline having its own rest of whatever shit.
Yeah.
So I think that now, when we get Apocalypse, and then what I'm assuming will be the final Wolverine movie, because I think that this next one is the last that
I think
Hugh
he said
Jackman's
he's
going to do.
done.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. He's more than welcome to up and quit now. He's done
You
so
can
much
just
already.
stop before this one. Fuck you. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Well, now that I know he's going to have at least like a little part in Apocalypse, I'm
Yeah.
happy about that for sure. I'm mainly happy with it being just the main team focused on, but Wolverine being in it also, I'm totally cool with.
What I think that ending did is just establish that whether or not the first three movies happened, they didn't happen exactly as you know them.
Right.
So that even though we're in the past, we can move forward without having to be slavish to the previous movies.
Right,
You
exactly.
don't have to have everything lead up to the events of X-Men.
Right,
Exactly.
yeah, which I think was what people, what not people were worried about, what people assumed was going to be the case
Right.
with these movies, and now they don't have to do that, because if they do that, then it's just going to be fucking boring.
Yeah, they're no longer hamstrung by the continuity.
Yeah, I mean, the continuity is First Class onward.
Yeah.
And that's totally cool with me, because so far that has been a much more enjoyable ride, and I'm excited to see what happens next with them in a way that I wasn't with the trilogy, even though I enjoyed the trilogy
Super
for
looking
what it
forward
was.
to Oscar
X-
Isaac. Super looking
Oh,
forward to
yeah.
Sophie Turner.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because with X1, X2, you left really wanting to see the next one. X3, you're just like, oh, where are they going to go from here?
Yeah, and then
When are they gonna?
And so they've kind
What
of
next?
brought the I want to see what's next back.
yeah, I mean, because First Class just made people get up whoa, ears perked up, what's going on now with X-Men? Holy
Yeah.
shit, guys! And then Days of Future Past, I think, definitely continued that for sure.
Yeah.
And I think also with Days of Future Past, I think that even though they wanted to go they're going bigger scale with each of these, with this, and then also now Apocalypse, finally after 7-8 movies they've done now, they're doing Apocalypse now. But also Days of Future Past didn't feel like it was trying to be better than First Class.
No.
So and that's okay. It doesn't have to be better. It was a very, very enjoyable
It just has
experience.
to be good on its own
Yeah.
merits. And I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of the superhero movies, just in general.
Yeah.
Is so many of them feel like they exist as bridges between the movie that preceded it and the movie that's going to follow.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where Days of Future Past excelled. It tied up a lot of stuff, and it rewards you for following the previous movies. And really, you do need to see it, but it wasn't in a situation where oh man, there's no substance outside of what's previously happened and what's obviously going to happen.
Yeah.
It still had its own action within the film.
I mean, people, funnily enough, this is a little off topic, but either way, Dragon Ball Super is a new series airing in Japan right now, and it takes place between basically just before the end of Dragon Ball Z and just before Dragon Ball GT, which was
The show that everybody hates, quote unquote.
Yeah.
and so far nothing has happened in the show that contradicts Dragon Ball GT, so it could still technically have happened. And a lot of people are debating that and everything, and making a big continuity fight out of it. But I'm just that's not what it's about. It's about, hey, Toei Animation wants to make new stories with the Dragon Ball characters, who are these big, legendary, powerhouse iconic characters in anime. Tell new stories with them. This point in Dragon Ball Z is enough of an open space of 10 years before GT happens, where they can do a whole bunch of different things with it and be free. With this, it's okay, it's not about just adhering to the lore and the timelines and all the technical shit. No, it's about telling an interesting and intriguing story about Charles, getting back into his shit again, and Mystique figuring out what her moral stance is on humans and mutants, and Logan, probably one of the best uses of Wolverine in the movies that I've seen, even barring the movies focused on him.
And Beast figuring out that it's okay to be him as
Yeah.
he is. Kitty figuring out that her power set doesn't need to have any resemblance to the comic books at all, ever.
That was a strange. I was like, is that based on something, or was that just
No,
from the movie?
that's just the
yeah.
You know what
and-
though? It's such a limited power set if you talk about it from
Well,
the scale
and
of the movie.
if you really, really want to get no pricey, so she could phase through matter, and she has learned to phase through time.
Yeah, I mean that's what I gathered, but I was that was the case where I'm just you sure it's not just gonna be I mean, you have Bishop and Blink and all these and Warpath and all these new characters. You really didn't just have a new character to do that, but I don't know.
and
Not
so-
that I don't love Kitty, but
Yeah, and in the original story, Rachel Summers, who is the daughter of
Yeah.
Cyclops and Jean,
Yeah.
sends Kitty's consciousness back into Kid Kitty's body.
Oh, it's Kitty.
So it's adult Kitty.
Oh,
and
okay.
Now, the timeline in the movie is far enough apart that Kitty would not be born.
Of course,
in the
yeah.
70s. And also, with it being moved to Wolverine, first of all, Wolverine's the big money powerhouse character. So
the logical reason for them using it
the
made
actor
sense.
can be the same
Yeah,
because the
yeah,
character doesn't
exactly.
age.
Yeah.
So,
It was a good choice.
Again, I can't be a purist about it because that's a really smart way of
Absolutely, yeah.
handling.
And again, Professor X and Magneto and the two timeline versions of them, even again past the actors, that was a great device. That story, and then also with Mystique, because I mean, future Mystique isn't a fucking character because the whole thing was that she died and they used her DNA and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But past Mystique in that as that turning point worked so incredibly well. Days of Future Past is even better than I remember when I went back and I watched it. Road Cut, if you want to see it, because I just bought it on Google and just played it, I rented it or whatever. Doesn't really add too much if you want to check it out just for the sake of seeing the difference.
That's just deleted scenes edited in.
Yeah. I guess kind of to wrap it up, now obviously Apocalypse has had reviews already, and some people have seen it and everything. I know a lot of people have their gripes. I am excited to see it again after watching Days of Future Past. And actually, no, Peter, you were explaining to me your kind of thoughts after reading some reviews on it.
Okay, so apparently, there's the divide between the people who like explodey movies and then the people who think that X-Men should be really heavy
cerebral,
thoughts and cerebral, a lot of philosophical stuff. And like I said earlier, a lot of the X-Men canon has a lot to do with taking the lens, putting it back on, examining our society.
Sure.
There's a lot of historical points to that. The Mutant Registration Act, or later on the Superhero Registration Act, being used as an allegory for the Patriot Act. The legacy virus is an allegory for HIV. But at the same time, occasionally you have to have a movie that's just a big, giant, explodey thing. And if there's going to be a single character that's going to be the big, giant, explodey thing, it's going to be Apocalypse. That's what he does. I mean, I'm not saying that he doesn't have his philosophical moments. He does. You don't really get to have the four horsemen of the apocalypse without thinking about the nature of life.
Right.
However, that said, it's okay to have a big, explodey thing.
Yeah.
I think that... So I have to say I haven't read any of the pre-reviews of the movie. I tend to truly avoid doing that.
Right.
Specifically because I don't want to go into a film like that and say, well,
Already
I'm
have
told
your
I
opinion.
hate this.
Right.
I'm told I ought to hate this. And there are the movies that are simply never going to appeal to me, and I'm not going to pay the money for the ticket to go see that. I don't want to see the Angry Birds movie, and so I'm not going to pay the money for the ticket.
Let that be a listen to you, folks.
Well, but no amount of effusive reviews is going to change my mind. I'm not going to say, oh, wow, I'm really reconsidering the Angry Birds movie. Unless, somebody that I truly trust says, no, you don't understand. It's truly spectacular. That's not the normal thing for me. By the same token, folks who are really angry that this isn't more cerebral, isn't more plot heavy, is more special effects, is more action, that I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that it's going to be a fun movie, and I have no reason to think that it won't be.
Yeah.
McAvoy and Fassbender are just spectacular. And my God, Jennifer Lawrence is really very good, and good enough that it is clearly a struggle to keep her doing these movies. And I think this is going to be, the last one, possibly.
You think?
I think it's the last one they're contracted.
Right, and so we'll see.
Okay.
And who knows, maybe there'll be a solo Mystique movie, and that would be great.
Yes, please. Give me that
I'm
shit.
fine
Want
with
it.
I'm fine with that. I think it's worth remembering that Oscar Isaac is a tremendous actor. He's very good.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun. The idea of a character being the big bad, just a bruiser, you can have a good actor bring a lot of fun to a kind of big bruiser character. This is possibly the worst example that I can give you, but Raul Julia in Street Fighter.
Oh my God.
Oh, he's the
was a
thing
lot
that
of
made
fun.
that movie watchable.
He was a lot of fun.
But
it was a terrible movie, but he was great. It was a lot of fun. He was a blast because it was Raul fucking Julia doing
M. Bison,
for God's sakes.
But as far as the Apocalypse, based on what I've seen, what I'm looking forward to, because they're introducing this whole new class of characters. They're introducing Cyclops and
Or
Jean.
reintroducing the
re-
younger
Storm.
versions
basically
of them, yeah.
reintroducing the cast of the original movie.
Yeah.
And so it feels like to me what they're trying to do is set themselves up for the franchise to continue. Like Days of Future Past is a big band-aid so that they can go forward.
Right.
And then this seems to be set up so that they're in a place. I suspect this is setting up a whole bunch of different things where they could kind of branch out because they're wanting to do what Marvel's doing. And the X-Men as a property can do that. The X-Men is a huge
By
property.
itself, yeah.
Oh, God.
Because
Absolutely.
they've got they're talking about doing a new Mutants movie. They're talking about doing an X-Force movie. There's
Definitely
all
going to
of
be
the
more
different
Deadpool. There's
yeah,
definitely gonna be more.
definitely going to be more Deadpool.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways you can go with that, and I based on what I've gathered from just casting announcements and things like that, it seems like they're trying to set up the next batch of movies.
And I
And
think that's good.
They've got, what's her name, is Jean?
Sophie Turner.
Sophie Turner. That alone has me on board for the next batch of movies.
Yeah.
I think, if I could have a single thought with the X-Men movies, they run a tight, they walk a tightrope.
Mm-hmm.
The Marvel fans, in the time since the first X-Men movie to now in 2016, there's been the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas when they started the X-Men movies, there was no MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had the sputtering starts, the Hulk movies. And, right, well, so they, and you didn't really have the successes that you have now.
You certainly didn't have a success where it's just gleefully being a comic book movie.
Yeah.
You always had to dress it up.
But not even that, although that as well. But you didn't have the successes where, you know what, you can have as many complaints you want about, Civil War, and how the comic book story for Civil War was pretty bad at points. You're going to still go see the movie.
Yeah.
You're still going to go. It's become this huge thing. That wasn't there when X-Men started. And so now it is. And so you have everything is seen under the shadow of the MCU, which has become this enormous thing.
Yeah.
I mean, in the meantime, Disney bought Marvel.
Yep.
It became a huge deal. And so a lot of the fans are saying, oh, well, maybe this is going to be the one that's going to be bad enough to make it so that finally there's some sort of agreement that's going to make Disney buy the X franchise.
I don't want
back.
that. Yeah.
It just is a bad
that.
idea.
No.
Because, and if there's anything that I can say to everybody who is listening, it's a bad idea.
Yeah.
And you don't want it either, because having Fox produce the X-Men movies allows Marvel to make the movies like Guardians of the Galaxy. Why would you ever make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie if you could make X-Men?
Yeah.
They would have just done Starjammers.
Yeah, and honestly, I probably love the X-Men as characters more than the Avengers and Marvel Cinematic Universe, the characters that appear in those. But I don't want the X-Men in the MCU. I just don't. As cool as it is to fantasize about Wolverine or Magneto or some of those characters that are often with the Avengers and other Marvel superheroes in general, in those movies, as cool as it is to imagine that, I would rather have those movies, the MCU movies, be amazing and stand up on their own like they have been. And, Spider-Man is now integrating into it is going to be great, and I'm super excited about that because that can work. X-Men, and even in just as a franchise, I personally feel X-Men works better as its own thing.
Which is
Well, and also
reflective of the comics.
Yeah, which I've been told. Yeah, absolutely.
Through the 90s and even into the aughts a bit, X-Men has largely consistently been one of Marvel's most powerful properties.
I think it's actually still the most worldwide known comic on Earth.
Yeah,
as far as I know.
Avengers, in the lead up to the movie, they did a lot of revitalization of the Avengers comics, and those got really big. But X-Men has always been a consistent seller, and it still is.
Yeah.
And maybe they occasionally make missteps with the books, but they're always trying to find new things to do with it. They're not trying to cancel it because with Fox having the rights to X-Men, Marvel has to do nothing. Fox puts all the risk into making a movie, and Marvel makes money. They're going to be fine with this as an arrangement. Now, secondly, the fact that they don't have their most powerful franchise to lean on, they have had to revitalize all of their other franchises. Before Iron Man came out, who cared about Iron Man?
Yeah,
Drake Recorder and I talked extensively about that. Yeah.
Everybody now loves Captain America, but before the movie came out, nobody really could give you any details
The
other than
extent of anything that
he wears a flag.
Yeah.
The extent that anybody ever said about the Avengers up until the point of the Iron Man movie, and not anybody obviously, but was the Avengers arcade game, America still needs your help.
Yeah. Or Stars and Stripes. Good work, soldier, for Marvel vs. Capcom. Yeah, I mean,
will guilt you into putting more quarters.
that was my fucking experience with those characters.
So I mean, the Avengers were a thing, but it was like, well, I'm just playing the X-Men movie or X-Men video game under a different skin, and that's just. I mean, that was the extent of how the Avengers felt so much during the 90s.
And they've really, out of necessity, because they want to build their own movie franchise, but they've revitalized so many other franchises.
Ones that just wouldn't have otherwise been.
Yeah, and if they had the rights to the X-Men one, the X-Men is such a sprawling franchise that they would never have to get out of that. Mm-hmm. And so I like having more good stuff to pick from.
For sure, yeah.
And so, like, I can't really get behind it is only good if Marvel does it, because they can only, even as many movies as they do, they can still only do so many.
Yeah.
And
637
yes, we're incredibly
films
bloated with superhero movies, but I am thoroughly enjoying watching every one of them.
Oh,
if you
yeah.
have to split them between a couple studios to get that many, fine, let's watch them.
Yeah,
They're
and
fun.
I, honestly, like in the wake of just, I mean, this talk and just what we were watching Days of Future Past, I am still excited for Apocalypse.
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be good. I refuse to believe anybody telling me that it's going to be worse than X3, because it's just not fucking possible.
Takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
You have to try.
And also because Bryan Singer, I think, is still directing it, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I think it's going to be good. I'm excited. I believe the day this is going up, I'm probably seeing it tonight. So.
At worst, it's going to be stale. It's not going to be...
Or maybe not as good as the previous ones, but still
it might
good.
be a little
Yeah.
like, okay, we've been there.
Yeah.
No, hold on. So you're going to be seeing this the night that this goes up.
Hopefully, yes.
Okay, so here's what I want to have happen.
And play a game.
No, I want there to be the moment where you come in and you're recording on some crappy, laptop microphone, and there's a bunch of hissing in the background, and just, I didn't know it could be this bad. Holy shit! This is the worst thing I've ever seen. Oh no!
How could they make me hate Oscar Isaac?
If it's possible, I will probably be doing because I did a shaky cam shitty like little video for when I went to Civil War that night, and I will definitely be doing a separate Kirblog that will be coming out Tuesday or the last day of the month with my thoughts on the movie in general.
This movie made The Room look like The Godfather.
I fell asleep during The Room, so that's going to be a challenge if that happens. I don't think I could fall asleep during an X-Men movie. So actually on that same note, I made a little boo-boo and I realized I'm not going back home until Tuesday when the Kirblog about the Apocalypse thoughts, my opinions of the movie is supposed to come out. So I'm going to have to borrow Steve Yurko's laptop and bring my microphone, and maybe Mike and Steve will even join me to talk about the movie when we're recording it that weekend.
I just want to point out something really good about your phrasing here.
Sure.
My Kirblog about the apocalypse.
When the apocalypse happens, yeah. The movie will be so bad that it will destroy all life on fucking Earth.
My first thought is just like, so he knows it's going to happen next week.
My God.
Okay.
Thanks, Oscar Isaac. On that happy note, I think we're going to wrap this up.
With the end of the world.
This is one of the longest Kirblogs I've ever had. Didn't break my 2-hour mark, just underneath it. But
we have got 7 minutes and 29 seconds.
And you're not going to break that record with silence and holding me down.
About the history of cable.
I do want you guys.
I could.
Oh God. Let's not until Deadpool 2 comes out. But what I do want you guys to talk about is please plug your YouTube. Is it just youtube.com/floatinghandstudios or
Yeah.
youtube.com/floatinghandsstudios. Hands is plural and studios is plural.
I will also have some annotations to specific of X-Men cartoons of theirs that you should watch. Maybe have even seen before and just didn't know that they made them.
Yep.
They're amazing and hilarious. And as someone who's not a big comic book reader, I got all the goofy, obscure comic book jokes integrated into them. They're fucking hilarious. These guys wrote and animated and voiced everything in them, and they're hilarious. Check them out. Thank you guys for joining. Do you have individual Twitters too, or no?
Well, if you, my Twitter is @PeteGresser. I'm more likely to be on Tumblr at Pete.
Okay, and then
And I'm Wogoat, WOGOAT.
okay.
I've also got I think it's just Floating Hands Tumblr.
Yeah.
There's also a Wogoat Tumblr. I'm so bad at updating my social media.
Whatever. I'll link all that shit anyway. So check them
YouTube is
out.
probably the best one to keep up for my stuff.
I'll just link that for you. That'll be fine. Okay, cool.
Yeah, Wogoat Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining.
Thank you for having us.
In the comments below, everybody, let us know your thoughts, hopes, dreams, aspirations, opinions, anything whatsoever on any and all of the X-Men movies, the original trilogy, Can't say the Singer trilogy because that's not true. The original trilogy, the Wolverine couple movies, the couple recent First Class and Onward
Or
movies.
possibly the most important X-Men franchise movie to be done at all, the Generation X television movie from the 90s.
on Fox.
On Fox.
And we didn't mention it.
Oh,
Too late. Leave your thoughts about that and that. I'll future Marvel Kirblog topics, suggestions, leave comments about that too, because Mayorville will be coming to a close in just a few more days after this goes up. I'll be ending once more with my thoughts on Apocalypse. Maybe Mike and Steve will join me. We'll see what happens. I might just do it by myself. Whatever. We'll see. Look forward to that. Check out these guys' stuff and their cartoons and blah, 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 and look forward to more shit in the future. And that'll do it. So, X-Men, welcome. Goodbye!